When death comes for you in the mountains, it doesn't announce itself. It just waits. Alara Vance has 3 weeks before the cold finishes what grief started. Her husband is buried behind the cabin. Her supplies won't last till spring. And the stranger standing at her door with an impossible offer might be her only way out, or the worst mistake she'll ever make. This is a story about survival, second chances, and the choices we make when there's nothing left to lose. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind came down from the peaks like something with teeth. Alara Vance stood in the doorway of her cabin, watching the sky turn the color of old bruises. October in the high country meant the weather could turn on you without warning, and she'd learned to read the signs. The way the aspens shivered, the smell of snow in the air even when the sun was out, the silence before a storm when every living thing found shelter. She should have been looking for shelter herself. Instead, she was counting. Again. 12 jars of preserves, half a sack of cornmeal, weevils, and all. Enough firewood to last maybe 2 weeks if she was careful. And careful meant cold. It meant going to bed hungry more often than not. It meant waking up in the dark and wondering if this would be the morning she didn't bother getting up. 3 months ago, she'd buried Thomas on the slope behind the cabin. The ground had been hard even then, late summer turning mean. She dug the grave herself, blisters turning to calluses, calluses splitting open. No one to help. No one to say words over him, just her and the dirt and the understanding that everything they'd tried to build up here was finished. She was 26 years old, and she knew what dying looked like. It looked like this. The cabin was falling apart in slow motion. Thomas had been good with his hands, good at fixing things, but he'd been sick for months before he finally gave out. Little problems had become big ones. The roof leaked in 2 places now. The door didn't hang right. One of the windows had cracked in a hailstorm, and she'd stuffed it with rags, but the cold came through anyway. Alara pulled her shawl tighter and stepped back inside. The cabin was 1 room. Bed in the corner, stove against the far wall, table, and 2 chairs that Thomas had made their first winter. She'd kept his chair exactly where it was. Couldn't bring herself to move it. Sometimes she still set a plate there out of habit, then stood staring at it like she'd forgotten how to count. The fire in the stove was dying. She fed it 2 small pieces of wood, not 3, never 3 anymore, and watched the flames catch. Heat was a luxury now. She rationed it like everything else. Her hands shook as she set the kettle on. Not from the cold, from hunger. She'd eaten yesterday, half a can of beans, some dried meat that was more leather than food. But her body was starting to turn on itself. She could feel it, the way her clothes hung loose, the way climbing the slope to check the traps left her winded, the way her thoughts moved slow, like they were traveling through something thick. She made tea from pine needles and sat at the table. The silence was the worst part. Thomas used to fill the cabin with noise, humming while he worked, talking through problems out loud even when she wasn't listening, laughing at his own jokes. She'd found it annoying sometimes, all that sound, but now she'd give anything to hear it again. The wind picked up outside, rattling the window. She should have left weeks ago. Should have packed what she could carry and walked down to the valley, found work in town, found a room somewhere. But leaving meant admitting it was over, meant giving up the only home she'd had since her parents died, meant starting from nothing in a world that didn't have much use for widows. And part of her, the stubborn part, the part that had dragged Thomas up here in the first place, refused to go. If she was going to die, she'd die here. The kettle whistled. She poured the tea and wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat soak into her bones. Outside, the sky was darkening fast. Storm coming, big one from the look of it. She'd need more wood. Alara pulled on Thomas's coat, too big for her, sleeves hanging past her hands, and stepped outside. The cold hit her like a fist. She made her way to the woodpile, loaded her arms, turned back. That's when she saw him. A man on horseback coming up the trail. She froze. Visitors didn't happen. Not up here. The cabin was a good 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, and that was Fergus McLaren, who was 70 if he was a day and hadn't left his property in years. Town was 8 miles down a trail that turned into a death trap when the snow came. Nobody came up here. The rider was big. That was her first thought. Broad shoulders, heavy coat, hat pulled low. He sat the horse like he'd been born on it, moving with the animal instead of fighting it. As he got closer, she could see he had a pack mule trailing behind, loaded with supplies. He stopped 20 feet from the cabin. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Alara's heart was hammering. She had Thomas's rifle inside, but it was inside, which meant it might as well be in town for all the good it did her now. Her arms were full of firewood. She was alone. And this man, whoever he was, could do whatever he wanted. "You Alara Vance?" His voice was deep, rough, like he didn't use it much. She didn't answer. He swung down from the horse, slow and deliberate. Tall, maybe 6'2", 6'3", weathered face, the kind of tan that came from years in the sun. Dark hair, shot through with gray, 40, maybe, hard to tell. Men aged fast up here. "I'll ask again," he said. "You Alara Vance?" "Who's asking?" Rowan Creed. The name meant nothing to her. He stood there, waiting. When she didn't respond, he gestured at the cabin. This was Thomas Vance's place. Was. Something shifted in his expression. "He's gone?" 3 months. Rowan nodded slowly, like this explained something. He glanced at the cabin, the sagging roof, the cracked window, then back at her. His eyes were pale, almost gray. Cold eyes. The kind that had seen things. "You planning to winter here?" he asked. "That's none of your business." "It is if you're planning to die." The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. She felt her face flush, anger rising to cover the fear. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're 2 weeks from starving, and you know it. Get off my property." "Can't do that." She took a step back, wood tumbling from her arms. "I have a rifle." "And you left it inside." He didn't move, didn't threaten, just stated facts. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to make you an offer." "I don't want anything from you." "You don't even know what it is yet." "Don't care." Rowan exhaled slowly, vapor pluming in the cold air. He looked tired. Not physically. He looked like he could work all day and night without breaking, but tired in some deeper way. "Thomas and I had an arrangement. He didn't tell you?" "Thomas didn't tell me a lot of things. We helped each other, shared supplies, traded work. He was supposed to come to my place last month, help with the harvest. Never showed. He was dead." "I know that now." The wind gusted, snow starting to fall. Small flakes, but they'd get bigger. Rowan glanced at the sky, then back at her. "Storm's coming. Let me say my piece, then I'll go." Alara wanted to tell him to leave, wanted to grab the firewood and get back inside and bar the door. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he'd known Thomas. Maybe it was the supplies on that mule. Maybe it was just the fact that he was the first person she'd spoken to in 3 months, and some desperate part of her needed the sound of another human voice. "Talk," she said. "You can't make it through winter alone. You know that. I know that. You need help." "So?" "So I'm offering." "Offering what?" Rowan met her eyes. "Marriage." The word hung in the air between them. Alara laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound came out harsh, half broken. "You're insane." "Probably, but I'm also right. You show up here, don't know me from Adam, and you think I'm going to marry you? I think you're going to freeze to death if you don't. There are other options. Name one." She couldn't, and he knew it. "I have a homestead 6 miles north," Rowan said. "Built it myself. Solid cabin, good roof, barn for the animals. I've got supplies to last the winter, and then some. Land's productive. I'm not rich, but I'm not starving either." "Good for you." "I need a wife." "So find one in town." "Don't want one from town." He paused. "I want someone who knows what this life costs. Someone who won't run at the first hard winter. Someone who's already proven they can survive." "I'm not surviving. You said so yourself." "You're still here. That counts for something." The snow was falling harder now. Alara's hands were going numb. She should go inside, end this conversation, send this stranger away. But she didn't move. "What's the catch?" she asked. 1 year, you marry me, live at my place, help with the work. After a year, if you want to leave, you leave. No questions. I'll even help you get settled somewhere else. And if I don't want to leave, then you stay." "Why?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I'm tired of being alone. But I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for help, partnership. You survive, I survive. That's it. You don't know anything about me. I know Thomas married you. That says something. Says I made one bad decision already. Maybe, but you're still breathing. He glanced at the cabin again, which is more than you'll be able to say come January. Alara felt something crack inside her. Not breaking, just shifting, like ice under pressure. She'd spent 3 months telling herself she could do this, that she could make it work, that giving up was weakness. But standing here, staring at this stranger with his impossible offer, she realized something. Dying alone wasn't strength. It was just dying. I need to think, she said. Rowan nodded. Storm's going to get worse. I'll wait in the barn. There is no barn. Then I'll wait with the animals. He started to turn away, then stopped, reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He held it out to her. Here. What is it? Bread. Made it yesterday. She stared at the bundle. When was the last time she'd had bread? Real bread, not the hard biscuits she'd been choking down. Her hand moved before her brain caught up. She took it. Rowan mounted his horse without another word and rode around the side of the cabin, out of sight. Alara stood there in the snow, holding the bread, watching the storm roll in. Inside, she unwrapped the cloth with shaking hands. The bread was still soft. She could smell yeast, salt, the faint sweetness of honey. She broke off a piece and put it in her mouth and nearly cried at the taste of it. She ate half the loaf standing at the table, forcing herself to slow down, to chew, to not make herself sick. Then she wrapped the rest and set it aside and stared at the wall. Marriage. To a stranger. It was insane. It was desperate. It was exactly the kind of decision that got women killed on the frontier. But what was the alternative? She looked around the cabin, at the cracked window, the leaking roof, the empty shelves, at Thomas's chair sitting there like a ghost. He'd brought her up here with promises. Good land, he'd said. Fresh start. They'd build something together, something that mattered. And for a while she'd believed him. She'd worked until her hands bled. She'd learned to shoot, to trap, to make soap and candles and all the 1,000 little things you needed to survive in the mountains. Then he'd gotten sick. And she'd learned that promises didn't mean much when you were coughing blood. Thomas had been a good man. She'd loved him in her way. But he'd also been reckless, stubborn, too proud to ask for help. And it had killed him. Was she going to make the same mistake? Alara walked to the window and looked out. The snow was coming down in sheets now, the world disappearing into white. Somewhere out there, Rowan Creed was waiting for her answer. A year, he'd said. 1 year of her life in exchange for survival. She thought about what that meant. Living in a stranger's house, sleeping under a stranger's roof, working beside someone she didn't know, didn't trust, giving up what little independence she had left. But she also thought about what it meant to stay. Slow starvation, freezing to death in her sleep, dying alone in a cabin that would collapse around her corpse come spring. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. She found him in the lean-to she used for the goat, sitting on an overturned bucket, hat in his hands. The goat, a scrawny thing named Belle, was nosing at his pockets. She thinks you have food, Alara said. Rowan glanced up. Do I? Probably. He pulled out a withered apple and offered it to Belle, who snatched it eagerly. For a moment, they just stood there in the small space, snow hissing against the walls. I have conditions, Alara said. His expression didn't change. I'm listening. I keep my own money. Anything I earn, I keep. Agreed. I want my own space, separate bed. Already have one set up. And if you... She paused, searching for the words. If you try anything, if you hurt me, I leave. No argument. Rowan stood slowly. He was even taller up close, and Alara had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. But his voice was steady, calm. I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not asking for that kind of marriage. I need help running the homestead, that's all. People say a lot of things. I know. He put his hat back on. But I'm not people. And my word means something. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this wasn't some elaborate trap, that there were still decent men in the world who kept their promises, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. 1 year, she said. 1 year. And I can leave any time. You can leave any time. Alara took a breath. Then I'll do it. Something shifted in Rowan's face. Not quite relief, but close. He nodded once. We should leave tomorrow morning. Storm will clear by then. Tomorrow? Winter's coming fast. Another week and the trail will be impassable. She hadn't thought about that, about leaving this place, this cabin, the only home she'd known for 2 years, about leaving Thomas. I need to pack, she said. Pack light. I'll come back for the rest. The goat. Bring her. I've got room. Alara looked around the lean-to, at Belle, at the few tools hanging on the wall, at the life she was about to walk away from. Then she looked at Rowan, this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere with an offer that made no sense. Why me? She asked. Really? You could have anyone. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because you're still here. Most people would have run by now, packed up, headed for town, started over, but you stayed, even when it was killing you. He met her eyes. That's the kind of person I need. Or the kind who's too stubborn to know when to quit. Maybe, but up here, those are the same thing. That night, Alara barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm rage outside. Tomorrow she'd marry a man she didn't know. Tomorrow she'd leave everything behind. Tomorrow her life would change in ways she couldn't predict. She thought about Thomas, about the way he'd smiled when he'd asked her to marry him, all confidence and charm. About the promises he'd made, about how quickly those promises had turned to dust. She thought about her parents, dead from fever when she was 19, about the boarding house where she'd worked after, the men who'd propositioned her, the ones who'd thought a girl alone was fair game, about Thomas rescuing her from that life. Or so she'd thought. Rescue. Funny word for it now. At some point the storm quieted. Alara got up and went to the window. The world was white, pristine, beautiful in the way deadly things often are. The sky was clearing, stars breaking through the clouds. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. I'm sorry, she whispered. She didn't know who she was apologizing to. Thomas, her parents, herself. Maybe all of them. Ticked. Morning came clear and cold. Alara packed what little she owned into 2 bags. Clothes, a few personal items, the photograph of her parents. She wrapped the preserves in cloth, loaded them into a crate, took down the rifle, checked it was unloaded, set it by the door. Rowan arrived as the sun broke over the peaks. He'd brought a second horse for her, a sturdy mare with kind eyes. Together they loaded the supplies, tied Belle to the mule. Rowan worked quietly, efficiently, and Alara found herself watching him. The way he moved, the way his hands gentled the animals, the way he didn't fill every silence with talk. When they were finished, he turned to her. Ready? Alara looked back at the cabin one last time. At the door Thomas had hung. At the window she'd patched. At the grave on the hillside, already disappearing under snow. No, she said, but let's go anyway. They rode down into the valley first to the town of Coldwater. The trail was treacherous, ice hiding under snow, but Rowan knew the way. He led them slowly, carefully, never rushing. Coldwater was barely a town. 2 streets, a general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a courthouse. 50 people on a good day. But it had what they needed. A minister. Reverend Ashford was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like wet paper. He looked at Alara and Rowan with barely concealed curiosity, but he didn't ask questions. Money was money. And up here, people minded their own business. The ceremony lasted 5 minutes. They stood in the church with no witnesses, no flowers, no celebration. Just words spoken into cold air, a book signed, rings exchanged. Rowan's ring was simple, unadorned. It fit her finger loosely. She'd have to wrap string around it to keep it from falling off. You may kiss the bride, Reverend Ashford said. Rowan looked at Alara. She looked back. Neither of them moved. We're good, Rowan said. The Reverend blinked. Oh, well, congratulations. Outside, they mounted the horses and rode north without speaking. The trail climbed steadily, winding through pine forests and across frozen streams. The higher they went, the colder it got. Alara's face went numb. Her hands ached even through her gloves, but she didn't complain. Around noon, Rowan stopped to rest the horses. He handed her jerky and water, and they ate standing up, breath misting in the air. "How much farther?" she asked. 2 hours? Maybe 3.
"You make this trip often?" "When I need to." More silence. Alara was starting to realize that Rowan wasn't much for conversation. He spoke when he needed to, and not a word more. It should have bothered her, but it didn't. After 3 months of silence, she'd almost forgotten how to make small talk anyway. They rode on.
The landscape changed as they climbed. Fewer trees, more rock. The mountains rose around them, massive and indifferent. Alara had always felt small up here, but today she felt microscopic, like the world could swallow her whole and never notice. Finally, as the sun started to sink, Rowan pointed ahead. There, the homestead sat in a high valley, protected on 3 sides by ridges. The cabin was bigger than Alara's had been, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a roof that looked like it could survive anything. There was a barn, a smokehouse, a chicken coop, a corral. Neat, organized, built to last. It looked like a home. Rowan led them down into the valley. As they got closer, Alara could see details. Firewood stacked in rows, protected by a tarp. A vegetable garden, already put to bed for winter. Tools hung on the barn wall, each in its place. This wasn't just survival. This was a life. Rowan dismounted and helped her down. His hand was rough, calloused, but his grip was steady. He didn't let go until she had her footing. "I'll show you around," he said. They started with this barn. It was warm inside, smelling of hay and animals. 3 milk cows, a dozen chickens, 2 pigs. More wealth than Alara had seen in years. Rowan introduced her to each animal like they were people, his voice softening in a way she hadn't heard before. "That's Bessie. She's the troublemaker. May's the gentle one. And Dot's the one who kicks if you don't talk to her first. You talk to your cows. They talk back if you listen." She couldn't tell if he was joking. Next was the smokehouse, where haunches of venison hung alongside cured pork and strings of sausages. The chicken coop, where hens clucked and settled for the evening. The root cellar dug deep, stocked with potatoes, carrots, turnips, onions. Shelves of preserves, barrels of flour and cornmeal and dried beans. It was more food than Alara had seen in one place since leaving the city. "You did all this yourself?" she asked. "Mostly. Some I traded for." He paused. Thomas helped, back when he could. There it was again. Thomas, the ghost between them. Finally, Rowan led her to the cabin. Inside was warm. A fire burned in the hearth, crackling and bright. The main room was larger than her entire cabin had been, with a real kitchen, a table that could seat 6, shelves lined with books. There was a door on each side, bedrooms, she assumed. Rowan gestured to the left. "That's yours. I'm on the right. Door has a latch inside." Alara opened the door. The room was small but clean. A bed with a real mattress, a quilt that looked handmade, a dresser, a chair, a window that looked out toward the mountains. On the bedside table, someone had left wildflowers in a jar. She turned to Rowan. "You did this?" He looked uncomfortable. "Figured you'd want some things of your own." Something in her chest tightened. She'd expected cold efficiency, a business arrangement, nothing more. But this small gesture, felt like kindness. And she didn't know what to do with kindness anymore. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rowan nodded. "I'll get dinner started. You should rest." He left, pulling the door closed behind him. Alara sat on the bed. The mattress was soft, stuffed with something better than straw. The quilt was warm. The room smelled like pine and cedar. She lay back and closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 months, she felt safe. Dinner was venison stew, bread, and coffee. Rowan cooked like a man who'd been feeding himself for years. No fuss, no waste, but it tasted good. They ate in silence, sitting across from each other at the table. Afterward, Alara helped clean up. Rowan washed, she dried. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers learning steps. "I'll need to know your routine," she said. "What you expect from me?" "You know how to milk a cow?" "Yes." "Collect eggs?" "Yes." "Cook?" "Well enough. Then we'll figure out the rest as we go." He paused. I'm not much for schedules. Work needs doing. We do it, that's all. What about winter, when the snow comes? We stay close to the cabin, keep the animals fed, make repairs, wait for spring. It sounded simple. It probably wouldn't be. I'll pull my weight, Ilara said. I know you will. How do you know? Rowan looked at her. Because you're here. Later in her room, Ilara lay awake listening to the sounds of the cabin. The fire settling, the wind outside. Rowan moving around in his room, then going quiet. She touched the ring on her finger. Mrs. Creed. She'd been Mrs. Vance for 2 years. Before that, she'd been Ilara Brennan. Now she was someone new. Someone married to a stranger in a valley 6 miles from nowhere. She should have been terrified, but mostly she was just tired. Tomorrow would come. Work would need doing. She'd learn the rhythms of this place, the expectations, the boundaries. She'd figure out who Rowan Creed really was and whether she'd made the right choice. For tonight, though, she was warm and fed and safe. It was more than she'd had in a long time. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. The first morning, Ilara woke to darkness and the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. She lay still for a moment, disoriented. The mattress was too soft, the room unfamiliar. Then memory came flooding back. The wedding, the ride, the homestead. Rowan. She sat up, fumbling for her clothes in the dark. Through the thin wall, she could hear the clatter of pans, the scrape of a chair. The smell of coffee drifted under her door. When she emerged, Rowan was at the stove, frying eggs. He glanced at her, nodded, went back to cooking. He was already dressed, hair still damp like he'd washed at the pump outside. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Coffee's on the table." She poured herself a cup and sat down. The coffee was strong, almost bitter, but it drove the sleep from her head. Outside the window, the sky was still dark, just a hint of gray on the horizon. "What time is it?" she asked. 4:30. "You always get up this early?" "Animals don't care what time it is. They need feeding." He slid eggs and bacon onto 2 plates, set one in front of her. They ate quickly, without talking. When they were finished, Rowan stood and handed her a coat from a peg by the door. "You'll need this. Gets cold in the barn." The coat was heavy wool, lined with flannel. Too big for her, but warm. She pulled it on and followed him outside. The cold hit her like a wall. Her breath came out in clouds. Above them, stars were fading as the sky slowly lightened. Rowan led the way to the barn, his boots crunching in the frozen mud. Inside, the animals stirred as they entered. The cows lowed softly. Chickens clucked from their roost. Rowan lit a lantern and hung it on a hook. "Bessie gets milked first," he said, grabbing a bucket. "She's the loudest if you make her wait." He sat on a low stool and got to work, his hands moving with practiced ease. Ilara watched for a moment, then went to collect eggs. The chickens were sleepy, docile. She worked her way through the nests, finding 14 eggs, each one carefully placed in the basket she'd been given. By the time she finished, Rowan had milked all 3 cows and was pouring the fresh milk through a strainer into large jars. "We'll need to slop the pigs after," he said, "then muck out the stalls." All right. They worked side by side for the next 2 hours. The pigs got kitchen scraps mixed with grain. The stalls got fresh straw. The water troughs were checked, refilled where needed. It was hard work, physical, the kind that made your back ache and your hands raw. But it felt good. Ilara had forgotten what it was like to work with purpose, to see the results of her effort right in front of her. At her cabin, everything had been about survival, about just barely keeping her head above water. Here, the work had rhythm, structure. It built toward something. When they finally headed back to the cabin, the sun was fully up, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Rowan made breakfast again, more eggs, biscuits with butter and jam. They ate at the table, and this time Ilara noticed details she'd missed the night before. The way the light came through the windows, the books on the shelves, worn spines with titles she recognized, the clock on the mantel, ticking steadily. "You read?" she asked, nodding at the books. "When there's time." "What do you like?" He shrugged. "History, mostly. Some poetry." "Poetry? You sound surprised." "I am." "Why?" She didn't have a good answer for that. "I don't know. You don't seem like the type." "What type do I seem like?" "The quiet type." Rowan almost smiled. Almost. "Quiet people can like poetry. After breakfast, he showed her the rest of the homestead, the spring that fed their water supply, cold and clear, the field where he grew oats and hay in summer, the slope where he'd planted apple trees 3 years ago, now dormant for winter but healthy. Thomas helped me dig the irrigation trenches, he said, standing at the edge of the field. Took us a week. He complained the whole time. It was the first time he'd mentioned Thomas without prompting. He complained about everything, Ilara said. But he worked hard. When he felt like it. Rowan glanced at her. You don't talk about him much. Not much to say. You were married for 2 years. Doesn't mean I knew him. She started walking before he could ask more questions. Behind her, she heard him follow. The days fell into a pattern. Up before dawn. Feed the animals, milk the cows, collect eggs, breakfast, then whatever work the day required. Chopping wood, mending fences, repairing tools, preserving food, endless, constant, necessary work. Ilara learned quickly that Rowan ran the homestead with precision. Everything had its place. Everything had its purpose. He wasted nothing, not food, not materials, not time. When he showed her how to do something, he showed her once, expected her to remember. She did. At first, they barely spoke beyond what was necessary. Hand me that hammer. The chickens need more feed. Check the fire. But slowly, as the days passed, the silence between them became less tense, less like strangers and more like two people who simply didn't need to fill every moment with words. A week in, the first real snow came. Ilara woke to white pressing against her window, the world outside erased. She dressed quickly and found Rowan already layering up by the door. We need to check this barn, he said. Make sure the roof's holding. They pushed through drifts already knee-deep. The wind drove the snow sideways, stinging Ilara's face. She kept her head down and followed Rowan's broad back. The barn roof was fine, but one of the shutters had torn loose, banging in the wind. Rowan climbed up to fix it, while Ilara held the ladder, squinting through the snow. He worked quickly, his hands sure despite the cold. When he climbed down, his face was red, ice forming in his beard. Inside, he said. They stayed in the rest of the day, the storm raging outside. Rowan worked on tanning a deer hide stretched across a frame. Ilara mended clothes, then started bread. The cabin filled with the smell of yeast and warmth. Around noon, Rowan looked up from his work. You bake often? Used to, before Thomas got sick. It's good bread. Thanks. Better than mine. She glanced at him, surprised. Was that a compliment? With Rowan, it was hard to tell. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Rowan pulled out a book and started reading. Ilara watched him for a moment, then got up and examined the shelf. She chose a volume at random, something about the Lewis and Clark expedition, and settled into the other chair. They read in silence for an hour. It was, Ilara realized, the most comfortable she'd felt in months. 2 weeks into their arrangement, disaster struck. Ilara was in the chicken coop collecting eggs when she heard Rowan shout. She dropped the basket and ran. She found him in the corral, on the ground, his leg bent at a wrong angle. One of the horses, the big stallion, was rearing nearby, eyes rolling white. Don't move, she said, though she knew it was stupid. Obviously he couldn't move. The horse, Rowan grunted, his face gray with pain. Spooked, kicked me. Ilara got the stallion calm and into the barn, then hurried back. Rowan was trying to sit up, his jaw clenched. It's broken, he said. Can you stand? Not without help. She got her shoulder under his arm and hauled him up. He was heavy, solid muscle, and the walk back to the cabin took forever. Every step made him grunt, though he tried to hide it. Inside, she got him into a chair and knelt to examine the leg. The break was bad. She could tell even through his pants. The shin bone, maybe. She'd seen breaks before, back when her father worked construction, but she'd never set one herself. We need to get you to town, she said, to a doctor. Can't. Storm's coming. We'd never make it. Rowan, you're going to have to do it. She stared at him. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You've seen it done. That doesn't mean, Ilara. His voice was steady despite the pain. There's no choice. It's you or nobody. Her hands were shaking. She wanted to argue, to tell him this was insane, that she'd make it worse. But he was right. The sky outside was already darkening, heavy with snow. They were alone. Talk me through it, she said. He did. Step by step, his voice tight but clear. She cut away his pant leg, revealing the break. The bone hadn't pierced the skin. That was something. She found 2 straight pieces of wood for splints, tore strips of cloth for binding. "You need to pull," Rowan said. "Get the bone back in alignment. It's going to hurt." "I know." She gave him a leather belt to bite on. Then she gripped his ankle with both hands and pulled. Rowan's scream was muffled but still terrible. Sweat poured down his face. But the bone shifted, straightened, clicked back into something closer to its proper shape. Alara bound the splints tight, her hands slick with sweat. When she was finished, she sat back, breathing hard. Rowan spit out the belt. "Good," he said hoarsely. "That's good. We should still get you to a doctor when the storm clears." "Maybe. For now, this'll hold." She helped him to his bed, propped his leg up on pillows, found whiskey in the cupboard and made him drink half the bottle. By the time she was done, he was fading, the pain and the alcohol dragging him under. "Alara," he mumbled. "What?" "You did good." Then he was out. The storm lasted 3 days. Alara did all the work herself, feeding the animals, milking the cows, chopping wood, keeping the fire going. She checked on Rowan every few hours, changing the dressing on his leg, making sure he drank water, ate something. He slept most of the time, which was probably for the best. On the 3rd day, the storm broke. The world outside was buried under 4 feet of snow, everything white and silent. Alara stood in the doorway, looking out at the impossible landscape. They weren't getting to town any time soon. She turned back inside. Rowan was awake, propped up in bed, his face drawn but alert. "How's the leg?" she asked. "Hurts like hell, but it's holding." "You need to stay off it." "I know. For weeks, probably." "I know." She sat down in the chair by his bed. "So I'll be doing everything." "Yeah. That wasn't part of the deal." Rowan looked at her. "You want to renegotiate?" She thought about it, about the work ahead, about being responsible for the entire homestead while he healed, about the fact that she could walk away right now, take one of the horses, ride back to her cabin. "No," she said. "I'll manage. I'll help where I can. You'll stay off that leg. Alara, I didn't set that bone just to have you break it again." Something shifted in his expression. Gratitude, maybe. Or respect. "Yes, ma'am." The next few weeks were brutal. Alara woke before dawn and worked until after dark. She learned to do everything herself, things she'd always relied on Rowan for. She learned that milking 3 cows took twice as long when you were doing it alone, that chopping enough wood for a day meant your shoulders screamed by nightfall, that mucking stalls was bad enough with help and hell without it. But she also learned that she could do it. Every morning, she thought about quitting, about how easy it would be to just stop, to let the animals go hungry, to let the fire die. But every morning, she got up anyway. Rowan watched her from his bed, frustration written across his face. He tried to help at first, hopping around on one leg, but Alara shut that down fast. "You're going to hurt yourself," she said. "I'm going crazy sitting here." "Then read a book." "I've read all the books." "Read them again." He glared at her. She glared back. Finally, he subsided. At night, after the work was done, Alara would collapse into the chair by his bed, and they'd talk. Small things at first. The weather, the animals, how much wood they had left. But gradually, the conversations deepened. "Why'd you come up here?" she asked one night. "To the mountains." Rowan was quiet for a long time. Same reason anyone does. Running from something. "What were you running from?" "War. After I came back, I couldn't... Cities felt wrong. Too many people. Too much noise. I needed space." "Which war?" "Does it matter?" She supposed it didn't. "You have family?" "Had. Parents are gone. Brother died in the fighting." "I'm sorry." "Long time ago." He shifted, wincing. "What about you? Why'd you marry Thomas?" He asked. "That's it?" Alara shrugged. "I was working in a boarding house. Men there thought I was part of the amenities. Thomas offered a way out." "Did he know? What it was like for you?" "I don't think he cared. He needed a wife. I needed safety. It worked for a while." "And then?" "And then it didn't." Rowan nodded slowly. "That's the thing about running. You can't run forever. Eventually, you have to stop and build something. Is that what you did? Trying to. He looked at her. What about you? You going to keep running? She didn't answer. 6 weeks after the accident, Rowan finally stood without the crutch Alara had made him. She watched from the doorway as he took a few tentative steps across the cabin. His gait was uneven, favoring the leg, but he was walking. How does it feel? She asked. Like hell. But it works. Don't push it. I won't. But of course he did. Within days, he was back to helping with the chores, insisting he could manage. Alara let him, mostly because she was exhausted and didn't have the energy to argue. They fell back into their routine, working side by side. But something had changed. The distance between them had narrowed. When Rowan handed her a tool, their fingers would brush. When they passed in the cabin, they'd nod, make eye contact. Small things. But they mattered. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Rowan spoke without looking up from the harness he was mending. You could have left, he said. What? When I broke my leg, you could have taken a horse, gone back to your cabin. Hell, you could have taken half the supplies. I wouldn't have been able to stop you. Alara set down her sewing. I know. Why didn't you? She thought about it. The truth was complicated. Part of it was pride. She'd made a deal and she kept her deals. Part of it was pragmatism. Going back to that cabin would have been a death sentence. But part of it, a part she was only beginning to acknowledge, was simpler. She didn't want to leave. I gave you my word, she said finally. 1 year. I'm keeping it. Rowan looked at her then, really looked at her. You're stubborn. So are you. Yeah. He almost smiled. Guess we're a match set. Winter deepened. The days grew shorter, the nights colder. Snow piled against the cabin walls. They lived in a world of white, isolated, alone, except for each other. And somewhere in that isolation, something grew. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was too fragile for that. Too new. But it was trust. It was the way Rowan would start coffee before she woke up. The way Alara would leave his favorite chair empty by the fire. The way they developed their own language of gestures and glances, understanding each other without words. One night, a blizzard hit so hard they couldn't even get to the barn. They sat by the fire, listening to the wind scream, hoping the animals would be all right. Tell me something, Alara said. Like what? Anything. I'm tired of listening to the storm. Rowan thought for a moment. My brother used to say the wind had voices, that if you listened close enough, you could hear what it was saying. What did it say? Nothing good, usually. He wasn't a cheerful person. Were you close? Close enough. He looked out for me when we were kids. I tried to do the same when we were older. Didn't work out. Alara heard the pain in his voice. How'd he die? Bullet. Quick, they said. I don't know if that's true or if they just tell people that. I'm sorry. Me too. He poked at the fire. You miss your parents? Every day. Even after all this time. What were they like? So she told him. About her father, who'd worked construction and came home every night covered in dust. About her mother, who'd sung while she cooked and never let anyone leave the table hungry. About the fever that took them both within a week, leaving Alara alone at 19 with nothing but a few dollars and the clothes on her back. Rowan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. You've had a hard road, he said. Haven't we all? Some harder than others. The wind rattled the windows. Alara pulled her shawl tighter. You ever think about leaving? She asked. The homestead, going somewhere easier. Every winter. But you stay. I stay. Why? Rowan stared into the fire. Because it's mine. I built it. Every log, every nail, every fence post. It's the first thing I've ever had that was really mine, not something someone gave me or something I took. And that matters. Alara understood that. The need to have something that was yours. To build instead of just survive. Yeah, she said quietly. It does. By the time spring started to think about coming, they'd settled into something like partnership. They worked together without needing to discuss it. Alara would start on the barn while Rowan got breakfast ready. He'd split wood while she did the washing. They traded off tasks, supported each other, filled in the gaps. And they talked more. About everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they'd been, dreams they'd given up on. Rowan told her about wanting to expand the homestead, maybe get sheep, build a second barn.
Alara admitted she'd always wanted to learn to ride properly, not just sit on a horse and hope for the best. I can teach you, Rowan said. Yeah? When the snow melts, we'll start with the mare. She's patient. I'd like that. One afternoon in late February, they were checking the traps Rowan had set in the woods. The snow was starting to melt, turning everything to mud and slush. Alara's boots were soaked through, her feet numb. They found a rabbit in one of the traps. Rowan dispatched it quickly, cleanly, and started to reset the trap. Here, he said, gesturing her closer. You should know how to do this. He showed her how to set the trigger, where to place the bait, how to disguise the trap with snow and leaves. His hands guided hers, patient, not rushing. Try it yourself, he said, stepping back. She did. It took her 3 tries, but she got it right. Good, Rowan said. Now you can check them yourself if you need to. As they walked back, the rabbit slung over Rowan's shoulder. Alara realized something. He was teaching her to survive without him. Not because he was planning to leave, but because he wanted her to be able to. Because he wanted her to have choices. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her. That night, as they skinned the rabbit together at the kitchen table, Alara found herself watching him. The way his hands moved, the concentration on his face, the gray in his hair catching the lamplight. What? He asked, noticing her stare. Nothing. You're looking at me like I've got something on my face. You don't. Then what? She almost told him. Almost said that she was starting to see him differently. That somewhere between the broken leg and the blizzards and the endless work, he'd stopped being a stranger. That she woke up now and her first thought wasn't about survival, but about whether he'd already started the coffee. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she said, just thinking. About what? About how we've got 3 months left. Rowan's hands stilled. He didn't look up. Yeah. And then I can leave if I want to. That was the deal. Do you want me to leave? Now he did look up. His eyes met hers, steady and serious. No. The word hung between them. I don't want to leave either, Alara said quietly. Something in Rowan's expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or hope. So don't. It's not that simple. Why not? Because, she struggled for words, because I don't know what this is, what we are. We're partners. Is that all? Rowan set down his knife. What do you want it to be? Alara didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but she wasn't ready to say it. Not yet. Not when everything was still so uncertain. I don't know, she said. Rowan nodded slowly. Then we've got 3 months to figure it out. March brought the thaw. Ice melted. Streams swelled. The world turned from white to brown to the first hints of green. Birds returned. The air smelled different, like growing things, like possibility. Rowan kept his promise and taught Alara to ride. They spent hours in the corral, him coaching from the fence while she learned to post, to use her legs, to read the horse's movements. She fell off twice, got back on both times. You're getting better, Rowan said after a particularly good session. I'm getting sore. That too. They started planning for spring planting. Rowan drew diagrams in the dirt, showing her where things would go. Oats here, hay there, vegetables in the plot by the cabin. She helped him prepare the seed, checking for mold, discarding anything that looked questionable. This is my favorite part, he admitted one evening as they worked. The planning, before anything can go wrong. Things always go wrong. I know, but right now it's all possible. Alara understood that too. The hope of spring. The idea that this year might be better than the last. One morning in early April, they were in the barn when Alara heard something. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. She and Rowan exchanged a glance. Visitors were still rare, and visitors in a hurry meant trouble. They stepped outside just as a man on horseback came thundering into the valley. He pulled up hard, the horse lathered and blowing. Rowan Creed? The man asked. That's me. The man dismounted and pulled out an envelope. Got a delivery for you, from the territorial office. Rowan took it, frowning. What is it? Don't know. Just know I was paid to get it here fast. The man glanced at Alara, curious, then back at Rowan. Good luck. He remounted and rode off without waiting for a response. Rowan stared at the envelope like it might bite him. You going to open it? Alara asked. Probably should.
He broke the seal and pulled out a thick sheaf of papers. As he read, his face went dark. What is it? Alara moved closer, trying to see. Rowan's jaw was clenched. It's a debt notice. For what? For Thomas. Alara felt her stomach drop. What? Rowan handed her the papers. She scanned them, the legal language blurring together, but certain words jumped out. Outstanding debt, secured against property, immediate payment required.
I don't understand, she said. Thomas didn't own anything. He didn't have any money. He borrowed it
From someone named Victor Thorne. Used your cabin as collateral.
He can't do that.
The cabin wasn't his to use. He was your husband. Legally, it was his. Alara's hands were shaking. How much? $2,000. The number was impossible. She'd never seen that much money in her life. And if I can't pay? Rowan's voice was flat. They take the property, which means they take this place. What? How? You're married to me now. Your debts are my debts. Your property is my property. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw fear in his eyes. Thomas's debts are mine too. The papers fell from Alara's hands. Everything they'd built, everything they'd survived, all of it about to be taken because of a dead man's mistakes. We'll fight it, she said. With what? We don't have $2,000. We don't have $200. Then we'll get a lawyer. There has to be a way. Alara. Rowan's voice was gentle but firm. This is the frontier. The law here doesn't care about fair. It cares about contracts. She wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but she could see it in his face. He'd already done the math, already seen the end. How long do we have? She asked. He looked at the papers again. 30 days? 30 days until they lost everything. Alara didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Rowan pace in the next room. Back and forth, like a caged animal. Every so often he'd stop, and she'd hear the rustle of papers. Then the pacing would start again. Around 3 a.m, she gave up and went to the kitchen. Rowan was at the table, the debt notice spread out in front of him. He'd lit every lamp in the cabin, trying to find something in those words that would save them. His face was haggard, eyes red. You should rest, Alara said. Can't. She poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot he'd made hours ago. It was bitter, overcooked, but she drank it anyway. There has to be something we're missing. I've read it 20 times. It's airtight. Then we go to town, find a lawyer. With what money? We'll figure it out. Rowan looked at her, and she saw something break in his expression. I'm sorry. For what? This. All of it. You married me to be safe, and now… Stop. She sat down across from him. This isn't your fault. It's my land, my problem now. It's our problem. Thomas was my husband. His debts, his mistakes, those are mine to carry. You didn't know. Doesn't matter. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. We're in this together. That's what partnership means. His fingers curled around hers. They sat like that for a long moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on both of them. We'll go to town tomorrow, Rowan said finally. See what we can find out about this Victor Thorne. Maybe there's an angle we're not seeing. And if there's not, then we fight anyway. They rode out at dawn. The trip to Coldwater took 4 hours on horseback, the trail still muddy from the thaw. Alara's mare picked her way carefully while Rowan led on his stallion, the debt notice folded in his coat pocket like a death sentence. The town looked the same as it had 6 months ago. Same 2 streets, same general store, same saloon with its peeling paint. But it felt different now. Hostile. Like everyone they passed knew what was coming. Where do we start? Alara asked as they dismounted. The land office. See if there's a record of the loan. The land office was a cramped room above the general store, run by a clerk named Henderson, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He glanced up when they entered, then went back to his ledger. Help you? Rowan laid the debt notice on the desk. We need information about this. Henderson barely looked at it. That's a private contract between you and the lender. I'm not the borrower. My wife's first husband was. Then take it up with him. He's dead. Not my problem. Alara leaned forward. Just look at it. Please. We need to know if it's legitimate. Henderson sighed, the put-upon sigh of a man who hated his job. He picked up the papers, scanned them quickly. Looks legitimate to me. Notarized, dated, signed. Everything's in order. Who's Victor Thorne? Rowan asked. Land speculator, operates out of Denver mostly. Comes through here a few times a year. Speculator, Alara said. You mean he buys up properties? Among other things. What other things? Henderson set the papers down. Look, I'm just a clerk. I file deeds and record claims. What Thorne does with his business is his affair. Has he done this before? Rowan's voice was hard. Loaned money to settlers, then called in the debts? I couldn't say. Couldn't or won't. Henderson's jaw tightened. You want legal advice? Hire a lawyer. I'm done here. He turned back to his ledger. Conversation over. Outside, Alara grabbed Rowan's arm before he could storm off. We need to stay calm. That bastard knows something. Maybe, but picking a fight won't help us. Rowan took a breath, forcing himself to settle. You're right. What now? Now we find a lawyer. The only lawyer in Coldwater was a man named Arthur Brennan. No relation to Alara, though she'd wondered the first time she'd seen his shingle. His office was even smaller than the land office, just a desk and 2 chairs crammed into what had probably been a storage closet. Brennan himself was in his 60s, thin as a rail, with ink-stained fingers and spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. He listened to their story without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a scrap of paper. When they finished, he sat back and removed his spectacles, polishing them on his vest. Well, he said, you're in a tight spot. Can you help us? Alara asked. I can try, but I'll be honest with you, cases like this don't usually end well for the debtor. Cases like this? You mean this has happened before? Brennan put his spectacles back on. Thorne's been operating in this territory for about 3 years, always the same pattern. He targets struggling homesteaders, offers them loans with reasonable terms, then he waits. Waits for what? Rowan asked. For them to fail, or die, or both. Then he swoops in, calls the debt, takes the land. He's acquired maybe 24 properties that way. Alara felt sick. And no one stopped him? It's legal. Predatory? Yes. Immoral? Absolutely. But legal. Brennan leaned forward. The contracts are solid. He uses real lawyers, files everything properly. By the time people realize what's happening, it's too late. There has to be something, Rowan said. Some loophole, some way to fight back. Maybe. Let me look at the contract more closely, but I need to be clear. My services cost money. $50 up front, another $50 if we go to court. Rowan and Alara exchanged a glance. They didn't have $50. They barely had $5. We can pay you in trade, Alara said. Livestock, supplies. I need cash, Mrs. Creed. I have bills of my own. Then we'll get it. Just start working on the case. Brennan studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, give me a week. I'll see what I can find. They left the office with nothing but a thin promise and 7 days less than they'd started with. That night, they stayed at a boarding house on the edge of town. The room was small, barely big enough for the single bed, and the walls were so thin they could hear every sound from the neighboring rooms. Alara sat on the bed while Rowan stood at the window, staring out at the street. We could sell the animals, he said quietly. That won't get us $2,000. No, but it might get us enough to hire Brennan, to buy some time. And then what? We lose the animals and the land? Maybe. Alara stood and crossed to him. There's another option. What? I could go back to work. The boarding house where I used to work, they might take me on again. I could send money. No. Rowan turned to face her. Absolutely not. Why not? Because I know what that work was like for you, what those men tried. I'm not letting you go back to that. It's not about letting me. Alara. His voice was fierce. I'd rather lose everything than watch you sacrifice yourself like that. She wanted to argue, but she could see it in his face. This wasn't negotiable. Then what do we do? She asked. I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. The week passed in a blur of desperation. They sold what they could, a plow Rowan had been saving, some furs from his winter trapping, tools they could live without. It netted them $37, not enough for Brennan, not even close to enough for the debt. On the 6th day, they rode back to town. Brennan was waiting for them, and the look on his face told Alara everything she needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "I'm sorry," he said. "The contract is solid, notarized, witnessed, filed properly. Thomas Vance borrowed $2,000 from Victor Thorne 2 years ago, used the cabin and surrounding land as collateral. The terms state that failure to repay within 3 years results in forfeiture of the property." 3 years, Rowan said. "Thomas has been dead for 6 months. He couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. The debt survives him, and now it's transferred to his widow." Brennan glanced at Alara. "Which means it's transferred to you, Mr. Creed, through marriage." "There has to be something wrong with it," Alara said. "Some mistake in the filing, the dates. I've been over every line. It's airtight." "So that's it? We just lose?" Brennan hesitated. "There might be one avenue. It's a long shot, but what? If you could prove the loan was made under false pretenses, that Thorne deliberately misrepresented the terms, or that he knew Thomas wouldn't be able to repay and structured the loan to fail. If you could show a pattern of predatory lending, you might be able to argue fraud." Rowan leaned forward. "How do we prove that? You'd need other victims. People Thorne has done this to before. Get them to testify, build a case that this is his business model. Then maybe a judge would invalidate the contract. And if we can't find other victims?" Brennan spread his hands. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing more I can do." They left the office in silence. Outside, the sun was shining, birds were singing, the world going about its business like nothing was wrong. Alara wanted to scream. "We find them," she said. Rowan looked at her. "Find who?" "The other people he's done this to, the other homesteaders. If there are 24, someone has to be willing to talk." "Alara, we have less than 3 weeks. Then we better start now." They spent the next 2 days riding through the territory, stopping at every homestead, every cabin, every settlement they could find. Most people wouldn't talk to them. Either they didn't know Thorne, or they were too afraid to say anything. But slowly, they started finding cracks. An old woman named Martha Holloway, whose son had lost his property to Thorne 5 years ago. A rancher named Davies, who'd watched his neighbor get foreclosed on 3 years back. A family who'd managed to scrape together the money to pay off their loan, but just barely. Each story was the same. Thorne would show up when times were hard, offer money with terms that seemed fair. Then he'd disappear for a year, 2 years. When he came back, he'd demand payment in full, with interest that somehow always pushed the total just out of reach. "He's patient," Martha Holloway told them, her voice bitter. "That's what makes him dangerous. He doesn't need the money right away. He can wait for you to fail." "Will you testify?" Alara asked. "If we can get this in front of a judge." Martha shook her head. "My son moved east, left the territory entirely. He won't come back, not for this." It was the same everywhere they went. People had stories, but no one wanted to stand up in court. They were too scared, too broken, or they'd already moved on. By the 10th day, they had names, but no witnesses. They were sitting in the boarding house room, going over their notes, when someone knocked on the door. Rowan opened it to find a young man, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and a messenger bag. "You the Creeds?" he asked. "We are. Got a message for you from Victor Thorne." Alara felt her stomach drop. "What message?" The young man handed over an envelope. "He's in town, says he wants to meet with you. Tomorrow, 10 in the morning, at the Silver Star Hotel." "He's here?" Rowan's voice was tight. "In Coldwater? Arrived this afternoon. He heard you've been asking questions about him." "And?" The messenger shifted uncomfortably. "And he says if you come talk to him, he might be willing to negotiate." After the messenger left, Alara and Rowan stared at the envelope. "It's a trap," Rowan said. "Probably. We shouldn't go." "We don't have a choice." Rowan opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, expensive stock, engraved lettering. Victor Thorne, Land Acquisitions. And below that, in neat handwriting, 10 o'clock. Don't be late. "He's playing with us," Rowan said. "Let him play. Maybe he'll get careless. Or maybe he'll just twist the knife." Alara took the card from him, studying it. "Tomorrow, we'll find out." That night, neither of them slept. At 9:30 the next morning, they walked into the Silver Star Hotel. It was the nicest building in Coldwater, which wasn't saying much, but it had carpet in the lobby and real glass in the windows. A clerk at the desk directed them to the second floor, room 7. Rowan knocked. "Come in," a voice called. The room was large, well furnished, with a view of the street, and sitting at a desk by the window was Victor Thorne. He was younger than Ilara had expected, maybe 40, with dark hair slicked back, expensive clothes, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stood as they entered, extending a hand. "Mr. Creed, Mrs. Creed, thank you for coming." Neither of them shook his hand. Thorne's smile widened. "Straight to business, then. I respect that. Please, sit." "We'll stand," Rowan said. "Suit yourself." Thorne settled back into his chair, steepling his fingers. "I understand you've been asking around about me, talking to former clients, making accusations." "We've been looking for the truth," Ilara said. "The truth?" Thorne chuckled. "The truth is in the contract, Mrs. Creed. Your late husband borrowed money from me. He failed to repay it. Now the debt is yours." "You knew he wouldn't be able to repay it." "I knew he was a poor risk. That's why I charged appropriate interest." 20% interest isn't appropriate. It's predatory. It's market rate for a high-risk loan. Thorne pulled out a cigar, lit it, took a long drag. "But I didn't ask you here to debate economics. I asked you here to make you an offer." "What offer?" Rowan asked. "I'm willing to reduce the debt. Cut it in half, in fact. $1,000 instead of $2,000. Ilara felt a flicker of hope, quickly smothered. "Why?" "Because I'm a reasonable man, and because I understand you're in a difficult position." He blew smoke toward the ceiling. $1,000. You have 2 weeks to raise it. After that, the full amount comes due. We don't have $1,000 either. Then I suggest you find it. Sell your animals, sell your tools, sell whatever you need to sell, but get me the money. And if we can't, Thorne's smile turned cold. Then I take the land, all of it, your homestead, the valley, everything you've built. And you'll have nothing. Rowan took a step forward. You're a vulture. I'm a businessman. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Mr. Creed, I could have simply waited for the deadline and taken everything. Instead, I'm offering you a chance. I'd suggest you take it. Ilara grabbed Rowan's arm before he could do something stupid. We need time to think about it. You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, the offer expires. They left the hotel in a daze. Outside, Rowan was shaking with rage. He's toying with us. $1,000 might as well be $10,000. We can't raise it. Maybe we can. How? Ilara's mind was racing. The homestead. Everything we have. If we sold it all, we'd get maybe $300. $400 if we're lucky. And then we'd have nothing left anyway. So what do we do? Rowan didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. They walked back to the boarding house, and Ilara spent the afternoon doing math that wouldn't add up. No matter how she calculated it, they were short, way short. As the sun started to set, Rowan left to take care of the horses. Ilara sat at the window, watching the street, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on her. Then she saw something. Across the street, a woman was putting up a notice on the board outside the general store. Ilara couldn't read it from here, but something about the woman's movements caught her attention. The way she glanced around nervously, the way she hurried away after posting the notice. Ilara went downstairs and crossed the street. The notice was handwritten, the letters shaky. Looking for work. Seamstress, cooking, cleaning. Will travel. And a name. Sarah Prentice. Ilara knew that name. She'd heard it 2 days ago from the rancher Davies. Sarah Prentice had lost her husband's farm to Thorne 4 years back. She'd been living in town ever since, barely scraping by. Ilara found her in a room at the cheapest boarding house, the kind where you paid by the week, and the walls were more gaps than wood. Sarah was maybe 30, but she looked 50. Worn down, used up, hollow-eyed. I don't want to talk about Victor Thorne, she said when Ilara introduced herself. Please, I just need 5 minutes. I said no. He's doing to us what he did to you, taking everything. We're trying to fight back, but we need help. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Fight back? You can't fight him. He's got money, lawyers, connections. You're just... She gestured vaguely. You're nothing. Maybe, but we're trying anyway. Then you're fools. Ilara sat down uninvited. Tell me what happened. How did you lose the farm? Same as everyone else. My husband got sick, couldn't work.
We needed money for medicine, for food. Thorne showed up like he always does, smiling, friendly, said he could help. We were desperate, so we signed.
And then? And then my husband died. The debt was due. I had 30 days to come up with $800. I sold everything I could, but it wasn't enough. Thorne took the farm, the animals, everything, left me with the clothes on my back and $20. Did he know your husband was dying? Sarah looked at her. Of course he knew. That's when he shows up. When you're at your weakest. Would you testify to that in court? Why? What good would it do? Because if we can prove he's been doing this deliberately, targeting sick people, desperate people, if we can show it's fraud, not just bad luck, we might be able to stop him. You won't stop him. Men like Thorne don't get stopped. We have to try. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head. I'm sorry. I can't help you. I can't. Alara left feeling defeated. She found Rowan at the stable brushing down his horse. He looked up as she approached. Any luck? No. He nodded, unsurprised. We should head back tomorrow. At least spend our last days on the homestead. We still have 2 weeks. To do what? We can't raise the money. We can't find witnesses. It's over, Alara. It's not over until I say it's over. Rowan set down the brush. I admire your fight. I do. But sometimes you have to know when you're beat. Is that what you did? In the war? Just gave up when things got hard? His jaw tightened. That's different. How? Because in the war, fighting meant something. This is just delaying the inevitable. Alara felt something snap inside her. Fine. You want to quit? Go ahead. But I'm not done. Alara, Thomas brought me to this territory with promises. He died and left me with nothing but debts and broken dreams. I'm not letting another man take what's mine, not without a fight. She turned and walked away before he could respond. That night, she lay awake planning. There had to be something she was missing, some angle, some leverage. Thorne was confident, maybe too confident. Men like that made mistakes. She just had to find it. Around midnight, someone knocked softly on her door. It's me, Rowan said. She opened it. He was standing in the hallway, still dressed, looking tired. I'm sorry, he said. You're right. We don't quit. I know I'm right. So what's the plan? Alara smiled. We make him think we're giving up, accept his offer, tell him we're trying to raise the money. And while he's relaxed, we dig. There has to be something in his past, some record, some proof of fraud. Where do we look? The land office, Brennan's records. Hell, we'll talk to everyone in this town if we have to. Someone knows something. Rowan nodded slowly. It's a long shot. It's the only shot we've got. They spent the next 3 days buried in paperwork. Brennan opened his files to them, every case involving Thorne going back 5 years. The land office clerk, after some persuading and a small bribe, let them review the transfer records. They interviewed anyone who'd had dealings with Thorne, looking for inconsistencies, mistakes, anything. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Thorne was careful, but he wasn't perfect. In 2 cases, the dates on the loan contracts didn't match the dates filed with the land office. In another, a witness signature looked forged. Small things, technical things, but they added up. It's not enough, Brennan said when they showed him. A judge might overlook these as clerical errors. Then we need more, Alara said. There is no more. We're out of time. That night, as they were leaving Brennan's office, they ran into Sarah Prentice on the street. She stopped, looked at them, looked away. Mrs. Prentice, Alara said, I told you I can't help you. I know, but I wanted to say thank you anyway, for talking to me. Sarah frowned. Why are you thanking me? I didn't do anything. You told me your story. That mattered. Something shifted in Sarah's expression. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. There's something I didn't tell you about Thorne. Alara's heart began to race. What? When he came to take the farm, he had a man with him, a clerk or something. They were going through the paperwork, and I heard them talking. The clerk said something about how the numbers didn't match. Thorne shut him up real fast, but what? But I think he was cooking the books, changing the interest rates after people signed, making the debt bigger than it should be. Rowan stepped forward. Did you see any proof of this? No. It was just something I overheard. That's why I didn't say anything before. It's just my word against his. Your word might be enough, Brennan said quietly. They all turned. He was standing in the doorway of his office, clearly having heard everything. If we can show he's been altering contracts after signing, that's fraud, real fraud, the kind a judge can't ignore. He looked at Sarah. Would you testify to what you heard? Sarah hesitated. Alara could see the fear in her eyes, the years of being beaten down. He'll destroy me, Sarah whispered. He's already destroyed you, Alara said gently. But you can stop him from destroying anyone else. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was something new there. Not hope, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Okay, she said. I'll testify. Brennan filed the motion the next morning. Alara watched him write out the petition in his careful script, each word deliberate. Request for injunction, allegations of fraud, demand for independent audit of all contracts associated with Victor Thorne. When he was finished, he blotted the ink and looked up at them. This will make him angry, he said. Good, Rowan replied. I mean it. Men like Thorne don't like being challenged. He'll come at you hard. Let him try. Brennan handed the papers to his clerk. Get this filed with Judge Marlowe. Today. After the clerk left, they sat in his cramped office, the weight of what they'd just done settling over them. Sarah Prentice had gone home, promising to return when the hearing was scheduled. She'd looked terrified but determined, and Alara hoped that determination would hold. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait, Brennan said. Judge Marlowe will review the petition. If he thinks we have enough for a hearing, he'll set a date. If not, he shrugged. We're back where we started. How long? Could be days, could be weeks. We don't have weeks. I know. Alara stood and walked to the window. Down on the street, people went about their business. A wagon rolled past. Two men argued outside the saloon. Normal life, continuing like nothing was wrong. She wondered what it would feel like to live that way again, without this constant weight of dread. Behind her, Rowan spoke quietly with Brennan about legal strategies, precedents, what they could expect if this went to trial. She let the words wash over her, not really listening. Her mind was already jumping ahead, planning for every possibility. That afternoon, Thorne's response came. A lawyer from Denver showed up at the boarding house, expensively dressed, carrying a leather case. He introduced himself as Richard Sterling, counsel for Victor Thorne, and handed them a document. Countersuit, he said smoothly, for defamation, harassment, and attempted fraud. Mr. Thorne is seeking damages in the amount of $5,000. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. $5,000? We don't have that kind of money. Then you shouldn't have made baseless accusations against my client. Rowan stepped between them. Those accusations aren't baseless. We have witnesses. One witness, a desperate woman with a grudge. Hardly credible. Sterling tucked the document under his arm. My client is willing to drop the suit on one condition. You withdraw your motion, accept his original offer of $1,000, and never speak his name again. You have 24 hours to decide. He left before either of them could respond. Alara sank onto the bed, the room spinning. This is insane. He can't just... He can, Rowan said grimly. And he will. That's how men like him operate. They use the law as a weapon. So what do? We don't back down. Rowan, if we lose, we'll owe him $5,000 on top of everything else. We'll be ruined. We're already ruined if we quit now. He sat beside her. You were right before. We fight. No matter what. She wanted to believe him, wanted to have that kind of courage. But the reality was crushing. They were up against someone with unlimited resources, powerful connections, and no conscience. What chance did they really have? That night, Alara couldn't eat. She pushed food around her plate while Rowan tried to make conversation, tried to keep things normal. But normal was gone. They both knew it. Around 8, someone knocked on their door. Rowan opened it to find Judge Marlowe's clerk, a young man with nervous hands. Hearing's been set, he said. Day after tomorrow, 9 in the morning. After he left, Alara and Rowan looked at each other. 2 days, she said. 2 days to get ready. Are we ready? Rowan's smile was thin. We're about to find out. They spent the next day preparing with Brennan. He drilled them on what to expect. how to answer questions, what not to say. He interviewed Sarah Prentice 3 times, making sure her story was solid, that she wouldn't crack under pressure. He pulled out every scrap of evidence they'd collected, organizing it, building the narrative. The key is establishing pattern, he explained. We need to show this isn't just one bad contract. It's systematic, deliberate, a business model built on fraud. Will that be enough? Alara asked. It'll have to be. It's all we've got. The night before the hearing, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through testimony in her head, imagining every way things could go wrong. Around 2 in the morning, she gave up and went to sit by the window. The town was dark, quiet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Stars scattered across the sky, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out below them. She heard Rowan's door open, then his footsteps crossing the hall. He appeared in her doorway. Can't sleep either? He asked. No. He came in and sat in the chair across from her. They were quiet for a long time, just sitting in the dark together. I keep thinking about the homestead, Rowan said finally, about losing it. And the thing that gets me isn't the land or the cabin. It's the work. Everything we built, all those hours, all that sweat, just gone. We haven't lost yet. I know. But I need to say this in case tomorrow doesn't go our way. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. These past few months with you have been the best I've had in years. Maybe ever. And regardless of what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that. You made that place feel like a home, not just a homestead. Alara felt her throat tighten. Rowan, let me finish. When I asked you to marry me, it was practical, a business arrangement. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that, at least for me. He met her eyes. I know the year isn't up yet. I know you can still leave, but I'm asking you not to. Not because of the land or the debt or any of that, because I want you to stay. She couldn't speak. All the words she'd been holding back for months crowded in her throat. You don't have to answer now, Rowan said. Just think about it. He stood to leave. Alara caught his hand. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm staying. The relief that flooded his face nearly broke her. He squeezed her hand once, then let go and left without another word. Alara sat alone in the dark, her hands still warm from his touch, and felt something settle inside her. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread about the hearing, and it seemed like half the territory had shown up to watch. Alara recognized faces from their investigation, homesteaders who'd lost land, people who'd heard the rumors about Thorne. They filled the benches, standing room only in the back. Thorne sat at the front with Sterling and 2 other lawyers, looking calm and confident. He nodded to people he recognized, smiled like this was just another day at the office. Alara wanted to wipe that smile off his face. Judge Marlowe entered at 9 sharp. He was an older man, gray-haired, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent years on the frontier. He took his seat and banged the gavel once. All right, let's get started. This is a hearing on a motion for injunction filed by Rowan and Alara Creed against Victor Thorne. Mr. Brennan, you're up first. Brennan stood. Despite his shabby office and ink-stained fingers, he looked solid, professional. He laid out their case methodically, walking the judge through the contracts, the discrepancies in dates, the pattern of targeting desperate settlers. Your Honor, we're not alleging that Mr. Thorne's loans are illegal on their face. We're alleging that the execution is fraudulent, that he systematically alters terms after signing, inflates interest rates, and times his collections to maximize seizures. This isn't lending, it's land theft dressed up in legal paperwork. Sterling stood to object. Your Honor, these are serious accusations without any concrete evidence. My client has operated within the law at all times. I'm not done, Mr. Sterling. Judge Marlowe waved him down. Continue, Mr. Brennan. We have testimony from a witness who overheard Mr. Thorne discussing these alterations. We have documentation showing inconsistencies. And we have 24 families who've lost everything under remarkably similar circumstances. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. Call your witness. Sarah Prentice took the stand. She looked small up there, her hands shaking as she swore the oath. Brennan approached gently, his voice kind. Mrs. Prentice, can you tell the court about your experience with Mr. Thorne? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper.
My husband was sick. We needed money. Mr. Thorne gave us a loan. And what happened when it came time to repay? We couldn't. My husband had died. I tried to sell everything, but it wasn't enough. The debt was bigger than I remembered. How much bigger?
We'd borrowed 500. When he came to collect, he said we owed 800. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Judge Marlowe banged his gavel for quiet. Did you question the amount? Brennan asked. Yes. He showed me the contract. It said 800, but I knew we'd only borrowed 5. What did you do? Nothing. What could I do? It was my word against his, and he had the paper. Brennan nodded. One more question. Did you ever hear Mr. Thorne discuss changing contract terms after signing? Sarah hesitated. Alara could see her struggling, fear warring with determination. Finally, she nodded. Yes. When he came to take the farm, he had a clerk with him. I heard them talking. The clerk said something about the numbers not matching. Thorne told him to shut up, that it was handled. Sterling shot to his feet. Objection! This is hearsay, Your Honor. Unsubstantiated gossip from a biased witness. It's direct testimony, Brennan shot back. She heard what she heard. Without context, without proof. Gentlemen, Judge Marlowe held up a hand. I'll allow it for now. Mr. Sterling, you'll have your chance to cross-examine. Continue, Mr. Brennan. Brennan asked a few more questions, then yielded to Sterling. The cross-examination was brutal. Sterling went after Sarah hard, questioning her memory, her motives, her credibility. He painted her as a grieving widow, looking for someone to blame for her own poor decisions. Isn't it true, Mrs. Prentice, that you signed the contract without reading it carefully? I read it, but yes or no, please. Yes. And isn't it true that your husband died before the loan came due? Yes. So you're bitter, angry, looking for someone to blame for your loss. No, You've admitted you don't have the original contract. You have no proof the terms were changed. All you have is a vague memory of a conversation you overheard. Correct? Sarah's voice broke. I know what I heard. What you think you heard. What you want to believe you heard. Sterling turned to the judge. Your Honor, this testimony is worthless. It proves nothing. Brennan stood. Your Honor, we have other evidence. Then present it. For the next 2 hours, Brennan walked the court through every discrepancy they'd found. The mismatched dates, the altered interest calculations, the pattern of targeting sick or struggling settlers. He called up Martha Holloway, who testified about her son's experience. He brought in Davies, the rancher, who described watching his neighbor lose everything. It was damning, or it should have been. But Sterling had answers for everything. Clerical errors, misunderstandings, people who didn't read fine print or understand compound interest. He made it all sound reasonable, explainable, innocent. By noon, Alara could feel the case slipping away. Judge Marlowe called a recess for lunch. Alara, Rowan, and Brennan huddled in a corner of the courthouse, speaking in low voices. He's good, Brennan admitted. Sterling's covering every angle. So what do we do? Alara asked. We need something concrete, something Sterling can't explain away. Like what? An original contract, something that shows the before and after, proof of alteration. Rowan shook his head. We don't have that. Sarah doesn't have hers. None of the other victims kept copies. Wait, Alara's mind was racing. Thomas signed a contract. Where would he have kept it? Your cabin? Maybe. I never found it when I was cleaning out after he died, but I wasn't looking for it either. Brennan checked his pocket watch. The cabin's what, 3 hours from here? Closer to 4. Court reconvenes at 1. Even if you left right now, you wouldn't make it back in time. Then stall, Alara said. Find a way to drag things out. We'll be back as fast as we can. Rowan was already moving toward the door. Let's go. They rode hard. The trail was muddy from recent rain, treacherous in places, but they pushed the horses as fast as they dared. Alara's mind churned the entire way, trying to remember if she'd seen any papers, any documents. Thomas had been disorganized, careless with important things. The contract could be anywhere, or nowhere. They reached the cabin in just under 3 hours, the horses lathered and blowing hard. The place looked worse than Alara remembered. The roof had partially collapsed over the winter. Snow and rain had gotten inside, ruining what little was left.
She pushed through the door, Rowan right behind her. "Where do we start?" he asked. "Anywhere. Everything." They tore the place apart. Elara went through the trunk at the foot of the bed, pulling out clothes, old letters, junk. Rowan checked the shelves, the cupboards, anywhere papers might be stored. They worked frantically, knowing every minute counted. Elara was about to give up when she noticed something. The floorboard by the stove, the one that had always creaked. It was sitting wrong, slightly raised. She pried it up. Underneath was a metal box, rusted but intact. Inside the box were papers, bills of sale, a claim deed, and at the bottom, a contract. Loan agreement between Thomas Vance and Victor Thorne. Amount $500. Interest rate 10% annually. Due date 3 years from signing. Elara's hands shook as she read it. 500. Not 2,000. 10%. Not 20. Rowan. He crossed to her, looked over her shoulder. Is that? It's the original, and it's different from what we were served. They had him. They rode back even harder, the contract wrapped in oilcloth and tucked safely in Elara's coat. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, shadows lengthening across the valley. The horses were exhausted, but they couldn't afford to stop. They made it back to Coldwater just as the courthouse was emptying for the day. Brennan was on the steps, looking defeated. When he saw them, his face transformed. "Tell me you found something." Elara handed him the contract. He read it once, twice, then looked up with something like wonder. "This is it. This is everything we need. Can we still present it? Court's adjourned for the day, but I can file a motion for tomorrow. If Marlowe allows it." "He'll allow it," Rowan said. "He has to." That night, Brennan worked on the motion while Elara and Rowan collapsed in their room. They were too tired to talk, too wrung out to do anything but sit and breathe. Around 10, Brennan knocked on their door. "It's filed," he said. "Tomorrow morning, first thing. We present the contract. And then? And then we see if justice actually means anything." The next morning, the courtroom was even more packed than before. News had spread that the Creeds had found new evidence. People crowded in, eager to see what would happen. Elara saw Sarah in the back, saw Martha and Davies and a dozen other faces she recognized, all of them waiting, hoping. Thorne looked less confident today. He sat stiffly, whispering urgently with Sterling. Judge Marlowe took his seat. "Mr. Brennan, I understand you have new evidence." "Yes, Your Honor. Evidence that proves beyond any doubt that Mr. Thorne has been altering contracts after signing." He handed the original contract to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Marlowe read it carefully, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Sterling. "Counselor, I have a contract here for $500 at 10% interest. Yet the contract you filed with the court shows $2,000 at 20%. Would you care to explain the discrepancy?" Sterling stood slowly. For the first time, he looked rattled. "Your Honor, without examining the document's authenticity, the signature matches, the date matches, the notary seal is genuine." Marlowe held up both contracts. "These are clearly different documents. One of them is fraudulent. We would need time to verify." "You'll have time after I issue my ruling." Marlowe set the papers down. "I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting the injunction. All debts associated with the Vance-Thorne contract are hereby voided, pending a full investigation into Mr. Thorne's business practices." The courtroom erupted. People cheered, shouted, pounded on benches. Elara felt Rowan's arm around her, felt tears streaming down her face. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd actually won. Marlowe banged his gavel. "Furthermore, I'm ordering a territorial investigation into all of Mr. Thorne's contracts for the past 5 years. Anyone who believes they were defrauded is encouraged to come forward. This court is adjourned." Sterling was already gathering his papers, whispering urgently to Thorne. But Thorne wasn't listening. He was staring at Elara, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he said. Rowan stepped forward. "Yeah, it is." 2 marshals approached Thorne. "Sir, you'll need to come with us. There are some questions about your business practices." As they led him away, Elara felt something release inside her. The fear, the dread, the weight she'd been carrying for months. It all lifted, leaving her lightheaded. People crowded around them, shaking hands, offering congratulations. Sarah Prentice was crying. Martha Holloway grabbed Elara's hands and squeezed tight. You did it, she said. You actually did it.
We all did it, Alara replied. Brennan appeared through the crowd, grinning. Well fought, Mrs. Creed. What happens now? Now? The investigation starts. They'll go through every contract, every transaction. Anyone Thorne defrauded will get their land back. And Thorne? If they find what I think they'll find, he'll be facing criminal charges. Fraud? Forgery? Maybe more. Brennan shook his head. He won't be stealing any more homesteads.
Outside, the sun was shining. Alara and Rowan stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at the town. We should get back, Rowan said. Check on the animals. Yeah. But neither of them moved. They just stood there, letting it sink in. They still had the homestead. They still had each other. They'd fought the system and won. Rowan? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me. He smiled, a real smile this time. You never gave up on yourself. I just followed your lead.
They rode home slowly, savoring the journey. The valley looked different somehow, brighter, more beautiful. The homestead sat waiting for them, solid and real. Their home. As they dismounted, Alara looked around at everything they'd built. The barn, the fields, the cabin. All of it still theirs. You know what this means, Rowan said. What? We can actually plan for the future now. Build that second barn, get those sheep, maybe even expand the cabin. Sounds like a lot of work.
It is, he grinned.
Good thing we're partners.
Alara laughed, surprising herself. When was the last time she'd laughed? Really laughed? That night, they sat by the fire like they had dozens of times before. But something was different. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable, companionable. I've been thinking, Rowan said. About what? About what I said the other night. About wanting you to stay. Alara set down her book. I meant what I said. I'm not leaving. I know, but I also know the year's almost up. And when it is, you'll be free of this arrangement, free to make your own choices. Rowan, let me finish. He looked at her, really looked at her. I want to do this right. Not a business deal. Not a marriage of convenience. A real partnership. If you'll have me. Alara felt her heart hammering. Are you asking me to marry you? Again? I guess I am. We're already married.
Legally, sure. But I'm asking if you want to make it real, make it mean something. She thought about everything they'd been through. The hard work, the brutal winter, the broken leg, the fight with Thorne. They'd been tested in every way possible, and they'd come through it stronger. Yes, she said. I want that too. Rowan's smile could have lit the whole valley. He crossed to her chair, took her hands in his, and for the first time since that awkward wedding ceremony in Coldwater, he kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, like they were both learning something new, but it was real. And it was theirs. When they pulled apart, Alara was grinning. We should probably celebrate. How? I don't know. We've never had anything to celebrate before. Rowan laughed. Fair point. They settled back into their chairs, sitting closer now, shoulders touching. Outside, the stars came out one by one, scattered across the endless sky. Tomorrow they'd start rebuilding. Tomorrow there'd be work to do, plans to make, a future to build. But tonight, they just sat together in the warm glow of the fire, two people who'd found something neither of them had been looking for. Home. Spring came to the valley like a promise being kept. The snow melted in earnest, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. Streams ran high with runoff. Birds returned, filling the mornings with song. And Alara woke each day to find Rowan already up, coffee made, ready to face whatever work the day required. But there was a lightness to it now that hadn't been there before. They worked side by side planting the fields, their hands sometimes brushing as they passed seed between them. They laughed more, talked more, touched more. The careful distance they'd maintained for months had dissolved, replaced by something warmer, more real. 2 weeks after the trial, a letter arrived from Brennan. Rowan read it aloud over breakfast. The territorial investigation has concluded. Thorne's been charged with fraud, forgery, and theft. 23 families are getting their land back. He's facing 5 to 10 years in prison.
Alara set down her coffee. Good. Says here they recovered almost $40,000 in fraudulent debts. The territory's setting up a fund to help people rebuild. That'll help a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Rowan folded the letter. Brennan says we're officially clear. No debts, no claims, nothing. The homestead is ours free and clear. The words hung in the air, free and clear. After everything they'd been through, it almost didn't seem real. We should celebrate properly this time, Alara said. What did you have in mind? I don't know, a real meal? Something that isn't beans or venison stew? Rowan grinned. I could make that happen.
That evening, he disappeared into town and came back with supplies. Fresh chicken, real flour, sugar, eggs, butter. Ingredients. Alara hadn't seen in months. While he tended the animals, she got to work in the kitchen. She made chicken with dumplings, biscuits with honey butter, apple pie from the preserves they'd put up last fall. The cabin filled with smells that reminded her of her mother's kitchen, of holidays and celebrations, of times when food was about more than just survival. When Rowan came in and saw the spread on the table, he stopped dead. Alara, too much? No, it's perfect. They ate slowly, savoring every bite. Halfway through the meal, Rowan reached across the table and took her hand. I want to build something with you, he said. Not just this homestead. A life. A real one. We already are. I know, but I mean, he struggled for words. I want to wake up 50 years from now and still be doing this. Still sitting across from you at this table. Alara squeezed his hand. Then we will. Over the next few weeks, the homestead transformed. They built a second chicken coop, doubling their flock. Repaired the irrigation trenches, getting them ready for summer planting. Started work on an addition to the cabin, a second room that would give them more space. The work was hard, endless, but it felt different now. They weren't just surviving, they were building. One afternoon, while Rowan was in town getting supplies, Alara realized something. She'd missed her monthly bleeding. Again, she sat down hard on the porch steps, her hand going to her stomach. It could be stress, could be the hard winter, the weight loss, the constant work, but some part of her knew with the same certainty she'd known that marrying Rowan was the right choice. When Rowan got back that evening, she was waiting for him. We need to talk, she said. His face went serious. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I think I might be pregnant. He stared at her. You think? I'm not sure, but I'm late, and I'm never late, and I've been feeling strange in the mornings. Rowan set down the supplies he'd been carrying, crossed to her slowly. How do you feel about that? Terrified. Yeah. And happy. Is that strange? No. He pulled her into his arms. No, that's not strange at all. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, letting the news settle. A baby. A child growing in this place they'd fought so hard to keep. It felt like the future announcing itself. We should see the doctor, Rowan said finally. Make sure. I know. And we'll need to prepare. Build a cradle, get supplies. Rowan. What? You're babbling. He laughed, nervous and delighted. I've never done this before. Neither have I. We'll figure it out. We always do. The doctor in Coldwater confirmed it 2 days later. Alara was about 8 weeks along, healthy, everything looking good. Due in late November, early December. A winter baby. On the ride home, Rowan couldn't stop grinning. A baby, he kept saying. We're having a baby. I noticed. We'll need to finish the addition before winter and get more firewood. And, Rowan, we have time. I know, I just want everything to be ready. Alara understood. After losing so much, after coming so close to losing everything, he wanted to make sure this child had what they'd both lacked. Stability, safety, a home that wouldn't disappear. Over the summer, the homestead grew. The addition got finished, creating a proper bedroom for them and leaving the main room for living. They bought sheep like Rowan had wanted, a small flock that grazed the high pastures. The garden produced more than they could eat, so Alara started preserving in earnest, filling shelves with jars of vegetables, fruits, jams. Other homesteaders started stopping by. Word had spread about the trial, about how the Creeds had taken on Thorne and won. People wanted to meet them, thank them, ask advice. Sarah Prentice came by with her son, who'd moved back from the east to help her reclaim their farm. Martha Holloway brought preserves and stories. Davies, the rancher, offered to trade wool for beef. Slowly, a community formed. They weren't isolated anymore. They were part of something larger, connected to the people around them through shared struggle and shared victory. It changed things, made the valley feel less lonely, more like a place where people looked out for each other. In August, Brennan rode up with news. "There's going to be a formal hearing," he said over coffee. "The territorial government wants to make an example of the Thorne case. They're asking for victim testimony."
"We already testified," Rowan said. "I know, but this is bigger. This is about changing the laws, making it harder for people like Thorne to operate."
"They want to hear from everyone," he hurt. Alara's hand went to her stomach, which was just starting to show. "When?" "September, in the capital. It'll take a few days, maybe a week." "I don't know if I can travel that far. With the baby." "You don't have to," Brennan said quickly. "They can take written statements, but they'd prefer in person if you're able." Alara looked at Rowan. He shrugged, leaving it up to her. She thought about Sarah, about Martha, about all the people who'd lost everything to Thorne's schemes, about the ones who hadn't been able to fight back, who'd just disappeared into poverty and obscurity. "I'll go," she said. "We'll go." The trip to the capital took 3 days. They traveled with Brennan and a group of other victims, a small caravan of people who'd been wronged and were finally getting a chance to make it right. Alara rode in a wagon most of the way, her back aching, Rowan hovering like she might break. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him. "I know, just being careful." "You're being annoying." "Same thing." The capital was bigger than Alara had imagined. Real buildings, paved streets, people everywhere. It felt overwhelming after months in the quiet valley. But it also felt important, like they were part of something that mattered. The hearing took place in a grand building with marble floors and high ceilings. Alara felt small walking in, intimidated by the formality of it all. But then she saw the other victims, saw Sarah and Martha and Davies, and she remembered why they were here. One by one, they testified. Sarah told her story, stronger now than she'd been in Coldwater. Martha spoke about her son, about the dreams that had been stolen. Davies talked about watching his neighbor give up and walk away. Each story built on the last, creating a picture of systematic abuse, of a system that had allowed Thorne to operate unchecked for years. When it was Alara's turn, she stood before the panel of government officials and told the truth. She talked about finding Thomas dead, about the debt she'd inherited, about marrying Rowan out of desperation. She talked about the fight, the fear, the feeling that the system was rigged against people like them. And she talked about what it meant to win, not just for them, but for everyone. Men like Thorne count on people being too tired, too scared, too broken to fight back, she said. They count on the law protecting them instead of us. And for a long time, that's exactly what happened. But it doesn't have to be that way. We proved it doesn't have to be that way. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one of the officials, an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, spoke. "Mrs. Creed, what would you have us do? How do we prevent this from happening again?"
Alara thought about it. Make the laws clearer. Require witnesses for all contracts. Independent verification of terms. Create a registry where people can check if a lender has complaints against them. And make it easier for people to fight back. Most folks can't afford lawyers like we could barely afford ours. Make legal help available. Make justice accessible. The woman nodded slowly. "Thank you. Your testimony has been invaluable." After the hearing, Brennan found them outside. "That was good," he said. "Really good. I think they're actually going to do something." "You think?" Rowan asked. "The political will is there to it. Too many people got hurt, too publicly. They have to act. And if they don't? Then we keep fighting. But I think this time, we won." On the ride home, Alara was quiet. Rowan, driving the wagon, glanced at her. "You all right?" "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how much has changed. A year ago, I was alone in a falling down cabin, waiting to die. Now I'm here. With you. With this." She touched her stomach. "It doesn't seem real sometimes." "It's real. I know, but I keep waiting for it to fall apart. For something to go wrong." Rowan pulled the wagon over and turned to face her. "Listen to me. Things will go wrong. Life doesn't stop being hard just because we caught a break." But we're not alone anymore. We have each other. We have people who care about us. And we have something worth protecting. That's more than most people get. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just stubborn. She laughed. That too. They got back to the homestead in mid-September. The valley had never looked better. The fields were ready for harvest, golden and heavy with grain. The garden was bursting. The animals were healthy. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd fought for, was thriving. Over the next few weeks, neighbors came to help with the harvest. It became a community event, people working together, sharing meals, celebrating the work. Ilara watched from the porch, too pregnant now to do heavy labor, and felt something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. In October, a letter arrived from the capital. The territorial government had passed new lending regulations. All contracts had to be registered with the land office. Interest rates were capped. Borrowers had the right to a 30-day review period before signing. And a legal aid office was being established to help people fight unfair debts. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. We did that, Rowan said, reading over her shoulder. A lot of people did that. But we started it. Ilara folded the letter. I guess we did. November came cold and early. The first snow fell on the 10th, blanketing the valley in white. Ilara was huge now, uncomfortable, ready for this to be over. She spent most of her time by the fire, knitting small clothes for the baby, while Rowan fussed over her. You need anything? I'm fine. More tea? Something to eat? Rowan, I swear, just checking. On November 23rd, just before dawn, Ilara woke to pain. Not bad pain at first, just a tightening across her belly. She lay there breathing through it, timing the contractions. When they were 5 minutes apart, she woke Rowan. He was up instantly. Is it time? I think so. I'll get the doctor. There's time. Help me walk first. They paced the cabin for hours, Rowan supporting her when the contractions got bad. Around noon, he rode to town for the doctor, leaving Ilara with Martha Holloway, who'd come to help. How you doing, honey? Martha asked. Been better? Won't be long now. The doctor arrived mid-afternoon. He examined Ilara, nodded approvingly. Everything looks good. First babies take their time, but you're progressing well. The labor went on through the evening and into the night. Ilara had never known pain like this, crushing and relentless, but Martha held her hand and Rowan stayed close, and the doctor kept saying everything was fine. Around 3 a.m, something shifted. All right, the doctor said, time to push. Ilara bore down, every muscle straining. Once, twice, 3 times. The pain was enormous, all-consuming. She thought she might split apart. Then suddenly, miraculously, it was over. A cry filled the cabin. Small, indignant, alive. It's a girl, the doctor said, lifting the baby. Ilara collapsed back, exhausted, tears streaming down her face. The doctor cleaned the baby quickly, then laid her on Ilara's chest. She was tiny, perfect, red-faced and squalling with a shock of dark hair. Hello, Ilara whispered. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching. Her crying quieted. And in that moment, Ilara fell completely, irrevocably in love. Rowan appeared at her side, his face wet with tears. She's beautiful. She's ours. Yeah, she's ours. They named her Clara, after Ilara's mother. The first weeks were brutal. Clara didn't sleep, which meant they didn't sleep. She cried constantly, needed constant feeding, constant attention. Ilara was exhausted, sore, overwhelmed. There were moments she sat in the rocking chair at 2 a.m, Clara screaming in her arms, and wondered if she was doing everything wrong. But Rowan was there. He walked the floor with Clara when Ilara needed to sleep. He changed diapers, brought water, made food. They split the work as best they could, taking shifts, supporting each other. This is harder than the trial, Ilara said one night. Rowan, rocking Clara, smiled tiredly. Different kind of hard. Do you think we're doing it right? I think we're doing the best we can. That's all anyone can do. By Christmas, things had settled into something like a routine. Clara was eating better, crying less. She'd started to focus on faces, to track movement with her eyes. And when she smiled, real smiles, not just gas, it made everything worth it. They celebrated quietly,
just the three of them. Rowan carved Clara a small wooden rattle. Alara made a special dinner. They sat by the fire, Clara asleep between them, and marveled at how much had changed. "A year ago we barely knew each other," Rowan said. "Feels like longer." "In a good way?" Alara looked at him. This man who'd appeared out of nowhere with an impossible offer, who'd given her safety when she had nothing, who'd fought beside her, supported her, loved her. "In the best way," she said. Winter deepened, but the cabin was warm. They spent the long, dark evenings together, Rowan reading aloud while Alara nursed Clara. Sometimes neighbors would stop by, bringing food or supplies, staying to visit. The isolation Alara had felt that first winter was gone, replaced by connection, community, friendship. In February, another letter came from Brennan. Thorne had been sentenced to 8 years in prison. All his assets had been seized and distributed to his victims. The territorial government was using his case as the foundation for new homesteading protections. "It's really over," Rowan said. "Yeah, it is." They stood at the window, watching snow fall on their valley. Clara was asleep in the cradle Rowan had built, making small snuffling sounds. The cabin was quiet, peaceful. "You ever think about leaving?" Rowan asked. "Going somewhere easier?" Alara thought about it. About cities with doctors and stores and people everywhere. About places where winter wasn't a fight for survival and land didn't have to be defended in court. "No," she said. "This is home. Even with everything we've been through? Especially because of everything we've been through. We built this. We fought for it. That means something." Rowan put his arm around her. "Yeah, it does." Spring came again, the third spring Alara had seen in the valley. The snow melted, revealing new life underneath. They planted the fields together, Clara strapped to Alara's back in a carrier Rowan had made. The work was still hard, still endless, but it felt different now. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. In April, they heard that Sarah Prentice had gotten married, a widower from the next valley. A good man by all accounts. She stopped by to share the news, looking happier than Alara had ever seen her. "Thank you," Sarah said, "for everything, for fighting when I couldn't." "You fought too. You testified. Only because you showed me it was possible." Sarah glanced at Clara, sleeping in Alara's arms. "You gave me my life back, all of us. We won't forget that." After she left, Rowan found Alara on the porch, looking out at the valley. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how strange life is. How one decision can change everything." "You mean marrying me?" "I mean saying yes when I wanted to say no. Taking a chance on something that made no sense. If I'd stayed in that cabin, if I'd tried to make it alone." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She turned to him. "I chose to trust you, and that made all the difference." Rowan kissed her forehead. "We chose to trust each other." Summer brought more changes. Martha Holloway's son decided to stay in the territory, rebuilding the farm Thorne had taken. Davies expanded his ranch, hiring some of the other displaced settlers as hands. The valley, once a scattered collection of isolated homesteads, became a real community. They started having gatherings every month. Meals shared between families, work parties to help with big projects, celebrations for births and weddings and harvests. Alara found herself at the center of it. The woman who'd stood up to Thorne, who'd shown everyone that fighting back was possible. She didn't feel like a hero. She just felt like someone who'd refused to give up. But she understood that sometimes that was enough. In July, Alara realized she was pregnant again. This time the news didn't terrify her. She told Rowan over breakfast, casual, like she was mentioning the weather. "Really?" He set down his coffee. "Another one?" "Looks like it." "How do you feel?" "Tired already, but good. Clara should have a sibling." Rowan came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "We're getting good at this. We're getting better at it anyway." Clara, sitting in her high chair, banged her spoon and laughed. She was 10 months old now, starting to pull herself up on furniture, saying mama and dada in an endless loop, full of life and energy and joy. Alara looked at her daughter, at her husband, at the home they'd built together. A year ago, she'd been fighting for survival, for the basic right to exist in this place. Now she was fighting for something more, for a future, for a legacy. The second baby came in early March, another girl they named Rose. The birth was easier this time, faster. Alara knew what to expect, knew how to breathe through the pain, and when Rose emerged, wailing and perfect, Alara felt that same overwhelming love she'd felt with Clara. "2 daughters," Rowan said, holding Rose while Clara toddled around the room. "We're outnumbered. You'll survive." "Will I?" "Probably." Life settled into a new normal. 2 babies meant twice the work, twice the chaos. But it also meant twice the laughter, twice the joy. The cabin rang with noise now, children's voices filling the spaces that had once held only silence. Alara wouldn't have traded it for anything. In May, the territorial government invited them to the capital for a ceremony. They were recognizing the people who'd fought against Thorn, creating a permanent record of what had happened. Alara and Rowan were asked to speak, to share their story with the next generation of homesteaders. They almost didn't go. The trip with 2 small children seemed impossible, but Martha offered to watch the girls, and Brennan sent money for travel, and eventually they decided it mattered enough to make the effort. The ceremony was held in the same grand building where they'd testified, but this time the room was full of people who'd benefited from the new laws, families who'd been able to fight off predatory lenders, homesteaders who'd kept their land because of the protections put in place. When Alara stood to speak, she looked out at all those faces and felt the weight of what they'd accomplished. "A few years ago, I thought I was going to die alone in a broken-down cabin," she began. "I thought I'd lost everything, that there was no way forward. But I was wrong. There's always a way forward. It might not be easy, it might not be what you expected, but if you're willing to fight for it, if you're willing to ask for help and give help in return, you can build something that lasts." She talked about Thomas, about his mistakes, and what they'd cost, about Rowan and the partnership they'd formed, about the community that had supported them, the legal system that had finally worked the way it was supposed to. "The frontier is hard," she said. "It takes everything from you and asks for more, but it also gives you the chance to build something from nothing, to create a life that's entirely yours. And if we work together, if we protect each other instead of preying on each other, we can make this place something special. We can make it home." The applause was long and loud. Afterward, people came up to thank them, to share their own stories, to tell them what the new laws had meant for their families. On the trip back, Rowan was quiet. "What are you thinking about?" Alara asked. "About how far we've come, about what we've built. Having regrets? Not even one." They got back to find the homestead exactly as they'd left it. The valley green with early summer, the fields planted, the animals healthy. Clara and Rose asleep in Martha's arms, both of them growing so fast it made Alara's heart ache. This was her life now. This was what she'd chosen, what she'd fought for. And it was enough. More than enough. Over the next few years, the homestead continued to grow. They built a proper barn, added sheep and goats, expanded the garden until they were producing enough to sell in town. Clara grew into a wild, fearless child who climbed everything and asked a million questions. Rose was quieter, thoughtful, always watching. They had a son in the 4th year, a boy they named Daniel after Rowan's brother. He was loud and stubborn and perfect. The valley filled with children, new families moving in as word spread about the community they'd built. They started a school, hired a teacher, created something that felt like civilization in the middle of the wilderness. Alara looked back sometimes and marveled at the distance between who she'd been and who she'd become. The terrified widow had turned into someone confident, capable, strong. Not because she was perfect, but because she'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up. She'd learned that from Rowan, who still limped on cold days from that broken leg but never complained, who worked from dawn to dusk and still found time to play with his children, who'd kept his promise to build something that lasted. On their 5th anniversary, they stood on the porch watching the sun set over the valley. The children were inside with a neighbor, giving them a rare moment alone. Alara leaned against Rowan, his arm around her shoulders, and felt peace. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to my cabin that day?" she asked. "Sometimes, but not often." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't matter. You're here now. That's what matters." "I almost said no, when you asked me to marry you. I almost sent you away." "I know." "What would you have done?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. "I would have respected it, but I would have left supplies, checked on you through the winter, made sure you were all right." "Even after I said no?" "You needed help. whether you wanted it from me or not. Alara turned to face him. I love you. I don't think I've ever actually said that. You've shown it every day for 5 years. I know, but I wanted to say it. Rowan kissed her, slow and deep. I love you too. Behind them, the cabin was warm with light. Their children's laughter drifted out through the open window. The valley spread out below them, peaceful and productive, theirs in a way that went beyond legal ownership. They'd built this, together, out of nothing but determination and hope and the willingness to trust each other when trust seemed impossible. And that, Alara thought, was the real victory. Not beating Thorn in court, not keeping the land, not even the family they'd created, though that was precious beyond measure. The real victory was learning that she didn't have to do everything alone, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that partnership, real partnership, made everything possible. She'd come to the frontier looking for safety and found something better. She'd found purpose, community, love. She'd found home. Years later, when Clara was grown and asking about how her parents had met, Alara would tell her the truth, about the desperation, the impossible choice, the stranger who'd offered salvation with no guarantee it would work. Weren't you scared? Clara would ask. Terrified. But you did it anyway. I did it anyway. Why? Alara would think about that question, about all the reasons, practical and emotional, that had led her to say yes to Rowan's offer. Because staying scared in that cabin would have killed me, she'd say finally. But taking a chance, even a terrifying one, might save me. And it did. Not the way I expected, but in every way that mattered. Do you think you would have survived without Dad? Maybe, for a while, but I wouldn't have lived. There's a difference. Clara would nod, understanding in a way only someone raised in this place could. The frontier demanded everything, but it also offered everything. The freedom to build your own life, the space to become who you were meant to be, the chance to prove that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. That was the lesson Alara had learned. That was what she'd passed down to her children and what they'd passed down to theirs. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to keep moving forward, one day at a time, with the people you choose to stand beside. Everything else works itself out. The valley would grow. The homestead would pass through generations. The community they'd started would become a town, then a city, then a place people came to looking for the same thing Alara and Rowan had found. A place to belong, a place to build, a place to call home. But that was all in the future. For now, Alara stood on the porch with Rowan's arm around her, watching the stars come out one by one, and felt grateful for the choice she'd made, for the man beside her, for the life they'd built against impossible odds. She'd survived. More than that, she'd transformed everything. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for.